Brilliant, we're live. Welcome everybody, welcome Romesh, welcome Andy. Let's get started. So thanks very much for everyone joining. So this is a Strive and Thrive is a series of LinkedIn Live episodes that's been created by Romesh and myself with the aim of enabling and empowering entrepreneurs to build businesses that achieve success in areas of people, planet and profit. Over the course of these series, you're going to join myself, Mike Oliver and Romesh as we invite interesting guests onto the panel. Today we've got Andy, who we'll introduce in a second, so that we can learn all about the mindset, skills and knowledge entrepreneurs need to strive and thrive in an ever-changing world. So as a quick introduction, my name is Mike Oliver and I'm the founder of Easel. I set up Easel about 4 years ago. We're on a mission to lead innovation through people, supporting individuals to go on their own entrepreneurial journeys, help teams shape, create and exploit new capabilities for both commercial and social good. Over the last 4 years, the team have worked across government, UN, industry, startups, supporting the adoption of novel products, technologies and services and taking them to market. Over the last couple of years alone, we've supported startups gaining revenue of circa 2 million plus through investment, through growth and through market penetration. I'm loving these discussions. Andy today is going to be super interesting. I'm looking forward to where this goes. And I will hand over now to my partner Romesh, who will introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Romesh, founder of the FD Consultant, which is a collective of part-time fractional finance director consultants who support growing businesses. I qualified as an accountant with a top 4 firm many years ago in London, spent several years at a FTSE 100 business. But in 2008, I pivoted my career to the world of startups, scale-ups and SMEs, where I've been chief financial officer or finance director of a number of successful growing businesses. I'm really passionate about helping businesses grow and thrive. And so I set up the FD Consultant 4 years ago.
Lovely. So, Romesh, as I ask each month, what is the most interesting learning you've done in your business in the last month?
I think for me, Mike, probably it's more of a reminder than a new learning, and that's the kind of a reminder of the restorative impact of taking time off. I had a good holiday a couple of weeks ago, and it took me a good few days to kind of, I suppose, wind down from work and stop thinking about it, so consistently, stop messaging and sending emails out. And actually, it was just nice to have a bit of a break and let the brain kind of relax and switch off.
Good.
How about you, Mike?
For me, I'm launching a new business product line called Bullfrog, and we've made some really good progress in the last 6 months. And over the next year, we're moving into the market. But we're in that difficult phase where we're all really busy. The plans are good, the money's good, the opportunity is great, and it's a true game changer. But how do we create the time for those things we want to achieve tomorrow when we're all super busy today? And I think one of the things I've realized in the last month is you've got to create those headspace and time for the opportunities that you're trying to create for next year, not just sort of focus on the here and now. And as a founder, entrepreneur, that's kind of one of the biggest challenges I have in running Easel and running a business. So been an interesting month of balancing the present and the future, I think.
That is interesting. Thanks, Mike. So everyone, welcome to Strive and Thrive episode 2. How to successfully exit a business. Today, we're looking at that utopian moment that all founders dream of. All that hard work and effort culminating into hopefully a big financial reward for the shareholders and an ongoing legacy that's left behind. In this Strive and Thrive episode, myself and Mike are going to get the opportunity to speak to Andy McNulty about his personal experiences running his own business and going on to exit. I'm really looking forward to speaking to Andy, not just to learn about his business experience, but also his personal journey. Full disclosure, Andy's a really good friend of mine. We went to university at Bath many, many years ago. I know he's got some fantastic insights to share. So Andy, welcome to Strive and Thrive. Really happy to have you here. Please go ahead, mate. Go on. Tell us about you and the business you founded.
Well, I first wanted to say that we probably won't touch on too many of the experiences we had at university. I'm not sure that's what we want to delve into.
I'll ask you that later.
Talk about them, but
that's a strong and very wise start, I think.
Although they are very formative years, so maybe there is something into. Anyway, let's not. Yeah, it's great to be on here, and thank you for inviting me. Do you want me just to start talking about myself? Is that?
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
I'll just give the potted history, because I could waffle on for ages otherwise. Well, we're here today because I just exited my business, which I started 10 years ago. In fact, I was at an event this week, 2 days at a Ho Seasons event up in Birmingham, and as well as the normal booth with selling to people and flyers and all that kind of stuff on the exhibition stand, I bought 2 balloons as well, 2 helium balloons that had 10th anniversary at the top of them, because it was 10 years, pretty much to the day, since we started Touch Day. And you might be thinking, like, why is he selling Touch Day? Why is he talking about going to Birmingham and pitching Touch Day to people when he's sold his business? The reality is I'm still a little bit inside Touch Day as an advisor, and they didn't have anyone else to go to this event, so I said I'll go. Anyway, so what prior to Touch Day, I was a bit like you, Rom. As you know, I was a chartered accountant for a Big Four firm, PwC, better than your one, Ernst & Young. I was, but I never wanted to be an accountant. And like, for those of you out there who are like, who kind of, I don't know, maybe can relate to this. I just never wanted to be an accountant. I just really didn't want to. My dad was like, we should be an accountant. I'm like, I want to be an accountant. But I justified it because I joined the growing business department of PwC, which essentially did what it says on the tin. I was auditing businesses that had just started and were growing. And it's quite interesting that that's where I started, and that's kind of almost where I've not finished. I hasten to say I haven't finished. There's an end of one chapter, let's say. But it was like I had to go through that formal accounting training, that experience, go through then industries. I had like over 10 years in the fashion industry, worked with businesses like Gucci, Alexander McQueen, Victoria Beckham, and they were all wonderful, fantastic experiences, but they were never really me. Like, I was not a fat, I'm like, this is I like to, Romesh will tell you some stories in previous times about my relaxed attitude in interviews, and I'm never somebody that likes to be too formal and uptight. And yet in those environments of corporate world, you tend to be morphed into that person, and it felt very uncomfortable to me. So jumped ship eventually and started Touch Day, and 10 years later I've sold it. So that's a quick background.
Good. So tell me, Andy, obviously on the entrepreneurial journey with Touch Day, give me some of the kind of high points you've had running the business, and obviously my following question, low points, but give me the kind of journey you've been on with running your business for 10 years.
The high points and the low points they're almost daily, and I think that's the first reality of running your own business, that as all the freedom that comes with it and all of this, I can get out of corporate culture and I can be myself and I can build the team I want, and we can build the product we want, and we can make our own decisions. They all are true, but in amongst it all is the daily grind of running a business, and there are tremendous highs and tremendous lows in that process. So, I mean, one of the biggest highs for me was it was a couple of years ago. We started doing company gatherings. So we're a fully remote business, not a huge team. We had about 15 to 17 people. But being fully remote meant that we rarely got together in person. We were all over the world. Remote was genuinely remote. We weren't like all in the UK. We were in America, Australia, New Zealand, Spain, Ukraine. So we started doing company meetups once a year. And the very first one was good, but it was a bit of a learning curve, like how to, organize an in-person meeting event and how to make it natural and stuff. But the second year, in terms of highs, was great because I had almost no involvement in the way the thing organically went. And there was a moment where I was sat in this meeting room we'd hired, and there were people doing stuff, and there was a presentation. I was at the back of the room, and I just sat there, I was looking, and I thought, I'm not someone that likes to go, well done, Andy. I don't, that's not natural to me. But I had a moment where I was like, wow, like this is the fruit of all that work. Like I have actually built a team, and this team are functioning, and they look like they're having fun. We had one in particular. There's one of our Ukrainian developers called Jane, and she has been with us for many, many years through the Ukrainian war as well. When that started, we kept her position. She went off to do some work with the Ukrainian army, and then came back. And she stood up at this in-person gathering we did, and she just made such a heartfelt, passionate kind of story about the purpose of Touch Day and why we existed and what we were here to do. And all of us in the room were just like, where did that come from? So those are real high moments when you get to see other people doing stuff and other people finding, I don't know, like a fashion and a purpose in a business in which you think it's all about you. It's not. It's about everyone else too. So that's the high point. But there are gazillions. Getting our first angel investor when we did we went on a Virgin Startup Accelerator. Both Joe and I had to do a pitch at the end. Joe was my co-founder. We had to do a pitch at the end of the evening to a bunch of people in the room, loads of angels, and pitch Touch Day to get investment. And out of that came our first angel investor. We saw her after we'd done the pitch, and she was like, I'm impressed, tell me more. And that was a real high, because without that anchor investor, we were struggling to find others. And that gave us that one who we could now say to everyone else, look, we've got this one at this value and at this commitment. And it gave us the confidence too, to know that we could stand on a stage, pitch to a room full of people who were going, yeah, come on, sell me. Why do I want to invest in you? And come out with something. So that was another real high. Loads of them. In terms of lows, I mean, I think the Ukraine war, when that started, was a low, not just because that stopped our business in its tracks. Maybe I should just back up a little bit. Some people may not even know what Touch Day is. I didn't actually explain that. So if you've ever gone and stayed in a vacation rental or a holiday rental, an Airbnb as it's called now, you would probably have arrived and there would be a binder on the coffee table which told you about the place and told you how the heating worked and what the Wi-Fi was and where the nearest best restaurants were and stuff. And page 5 would usually be missing because someone had walked off with it. There'd be a coffee stain on page 7, they're all the tattiness. So we decided we should create a digital version of that, so that it never got coffee stained and it never had page 5 missing. But more importantly than that, the guest, which was me, because I had this idea, I could get it before I even arrived. So I could start thinking already and get excited already about my upcoming stay and start to plan the things that I wanted to do while I was there. So, and it's a subscription service, a SaaS model, X per month or Y per year. And we can get into a bit of that later if you want to. How that all works. But the low point there when the Ukraine war hit, of course, was because we were in travel, all of our customers stopped. They didn't have a business anymore. No one was traveling. But more important to us at that time, because we knew we would be able to figure it out, we'd be able to survive, we knew it wouldn't be forever, etc. But more importantly, there were a bunch of people in Ukraine, our developers, who were like stuck, and being able to support them through that process and say your job is safe despite the fact there's a war in Ukraine going on, and hold their jobs open for as long as they needed. That was a low point, but it was also a nice kind of semi-high point that we were able to support them through that process. So yeah, that's some of my ramblings.
Really interesting. For you, it comes across as a people story. People talking highly, people having issues within the organisation, which I think is interesting. Did you have any challenges during COVID? Because in that industry, did you have points where you were really worried about your business, and there were times when you were like, "We've got to have a plan to push through"?
Yeah, we did, but it was a year into having got investment, so it was we had some money in the bank. It wasn't like we didn't have any runway. It would be a shame to waste that investment on burning cash to run the team. So what we did do is we just cut out all of the obvious costs that we could. We just removed all of those. We furloughed ourselves when that became available. We did that. We I can't even remember what we did, because a lot of our team is contractor based. They're not employed, so I can't actually remember what we did. But I know we worked with a lot of them to keep them on board. With the developers in Ukraine through COVID, we decided we would keep them, and they would just rewrite the platform, bring the code up to scratch, because there have been a number of years where we hadn't cleansed the code, and you keep adding features and the code can get a bit messy. So we decided to rewrite all that. So we put that to good use. And to be honest, once what was COVID March, and then by the time July happened, particularly in globally, but certainly in UK and US, markets opened really quickly. And being Northern Hemisphere businesses, it was peak summertime. And what did people want to do after 3 months of lockdown? They wanted to go away somewhere. And what did they need to do? They needed to go somewhere that they could be in a bubble, which was not a hotel. So it was vacation rentals. So we actually found that July and August of 2020 were like real upturns for us, because people thought that COVID existed on the laminated binders that would sit in the homes. Of course, that proved to not be true, but that was very helpful for us, because people thought, I can't have anything that people can touch inside the home. So get rid of that. And there's this digital product called Touch Day. And we were very fortunate that during that period as well, we had a number of industry influencers, particularly in the UK, who were very, very supportive and kind to us, and had us on webinars, and we could pitch what we were doing. And there's a big element of luck in that, as there is in all things that we do, isn't there? It's never by design successful. It's by design and being opportunistic about things that come along, and being a little bit lucky. And so to answer your question, we had a blip, but we came out the other side. And the years that followed, the 2021 and 2022, were definitely our biggest years of growth.
Really interesting.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. And it's good that I think you've pointed out the element of luck, because you can factor and solve for so many things, right? But you do need a little bit of lady luck on your side, I think, at times. But well done for navigating that incredibly tough time, for everyone, really. But just to kind of address some of the points you made. I mean, I was obviously I was part of your advisory board back then, and I was really struck about, in terms of how much you guys cared about your team in Ukraine, and that was a big topic. We discussed that several times, and the actions that you were kind of looking at sorting out to kind of make sure that they were safe and able to kind of just navigate that huge challenge. So yeah, that was, I think, something special about the business from my own personal perspective. One question I wanted to ask you, just based on your answer on the highs, was you talked about the importance of that first cornerstone investor, that angel investor you met on that accelerator program. Is there anything that you can kind of pick out in terms of your offering that you think got you that investment? What made TouchTay different to some of the other businesses that may not have got an investor?
I mean, I would say the first thing that we benefited from was the Virgin Startup Accelerator program itself, which got us to those answers that you've asked. So an 8-week program, they very much prepped you to know the answer to why do you value your business at what you valued it at. If someone asks you, how did you come up with that valuation, you've got to have a better answer than, well, we think. And so, through the course of the accelerator, you got challenged to think, and the whole point was to go to a pitch evening at the end and to raise money. So they very much set you up to succeed, rather than leaving you to kind of think about how you would address that room. But specifically, I think that the one advantage I certainly had was that I'm a finance person by background, and all my fashion roles have been as a CFO. So, trying to stand up in front of a room and talk about the trajectory of a business and why we think it's valued at a certain valuation and how we think we're going to get there, and plotting the numbers to an investor, at the end of the day, that's what counts, isn't it? And having that credibility to be able to stand up and do that was something that I feel really blessed, having done what my dad said, be an accountant, actually was very, very helpful to me in being able to stand up there. But we also had product market fit by that stage. So we weren't going in as a brand new startup. I should have said that for many years before that, Touchstone was a side gig, it was a hobby. I was still consulting in the fashion industry, and that's when I was with Victoria Beckham for a long period there. Touchstone was ignored. But we and helpfully too, because it was very early in our journey, we probably wouldn't have had the product market fit we did. But by the time we came to the Virgin Startup Accelerator, we already had customers, we already had case studies, we already had positive stories. We could already show what our pricing was, why it worked, what our customers valued in the product. We knew the industry, so we could very clearly articulate the size of the industry and the trajectory. We knew the players in the industry, so we knew how to go to market. So there were, I think, listen, I've seen through the years, through being in many kind of finance roles in different businesses, the pitfalls that you can get into. And whilst I've never run a business, I was observing the things that go wrong in business and the things that go right in business. And even on the cohort of people on the startup program, I could see already some of them were struggling with certain aspects of their business and articulating it in a certain way. And I don't know where, perhaps in the end, the accumulated version of all what I've said was enabled us when we stood up in front of the investors to sound credible, to look credible, to have thought thoroughly about things, but very well supported by the accelerator program itself, which forced you into looking at each area of your business and challenging you.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm getting from that kind of credibility, communication, and having a bit of a track record. Probably those are the kind of main factors in getting that. That's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, true. But I think at the end of the day, you've got to be able to sell the product. So for you for us to, like, credibility, trust, knowing the numbers, all of this kind of thing, product market fit even. But how do you tell a room full of investors that that's what you've got today, but in X years' time you can be, this hockey stick thing which you show on the graph to potential investors? And that's about going to market, and that's about understanding the channels in which you'll sell, the customer that you want to target, and so there is a lot of like preciseness about how you go, and because it's I think some people think, well, I'll just go and put a load of SEO on the web and do a few paid ads and like people will come. But obviously it's much more sophisticated than that. You've got multiple channels of distribution, and you've got different partners in the industry who are strong at certain things, who have got an audience, and if you can work with those partners, then you've got an audience of theirs that you can sell to. And so that was a key part of it too. It was all those bits you mentioned, Ron, but it was then also the ability for us to know the market really well. We weren't like kind of going, oh, we're just coming new into this and here's this thing we think will work. We knew what would work really well in the market and how we would go to market and sell the product.
Can I ask you a question based on something you said earlier? You said you're running it part-time in the background. What was the trigger to go full-time? Because it touches on what I said at the beginning about you've got to keep that long-term vision, keep things going, because otherwise they will die. But what was that trigger for you to go from little to making the jump?
There were a couple of triggers. Interestingly enough, before that jump, Joe and I were like, what are we doing with this thing? Should we just flog it? Should we just try and find someone to buy it? Do you know what? I almost sold it for 100 grand. I very nearly did that. And I was like, because we were both embroiled in our corporate life, and we had like nice fat salaries, frankly, and like life on paper and life on the bank balance was good, so, and we just thought, what's this thing? We're not going to be so we thought, well, we'll flog it. Fortunately, no one wanted it. I don't know why. I'm happy that no one wanted it, and we proved those people wrong because it definitely had value. But the trigger was, well, A, no one wanted it, and then so we thought, well, what should we do? But then B, I was working at Victoria Beckham at the time, and I could talk all day about that experience, by the way. But the mission there was to get the private equity investment into the business, and once that was done, my role in a sense was done. I was interim there, and I had discussions with the new minority owners about staying on and taking a role, and it was one of those crossroads moments, where you decide go straight on or left or right. And logically, it would have been a smart thing to have just kind of gone straight on and said great. but I did that left turn because, and to answer your point, Mike, I'll be honest here, I was sick and tired of putting my heart and soul, less so heart and soul, it was more effort, let's say, because I wasn't heart and soul into fashion, but effort, skills, time, sacrificing family life, all of this good stuff for someone else. And as great as it was to work for Victoria Beckham, it wasn't my business, it was her business. And although I was getting well rewarded for it, it didn't fulfill me. And I remember Joe and I used to meet once a week nearby their offices in Battersea. He was working nearby, and we used to go to the pub and we'd have a drink one night. And I went this one night and I told him all this. And at the same time, I had been to the doctor, and the doctor had diagnosed me with hypercholesterolemia. I can't pronounce it. It's basically a genetic condition where your body makes too much cholesterol. And I was basically told by the consultant, if we don't get on top of this now, you'll likely have a heart attack before you're 50 years old. And he was just, how consultants can be like so direct. And these combination of factors made me think, right. Interestingly, by the way, health is a reason why I came to sell Touchday. We can get onto that in a bit. But it was like a health decision coupled with why am I putting work, effort, time into someone else's business to make their business more successful? And whilst I'm getting rewarded, it's not me. And I wanted it to be me. I wanted to do. And we had this thing called Touchday. So that's why we jumped ship. Well, I jumped ship straight away. Joe stayed in paid employment for a bit. And I started, and I worked for about a year and a half without any salary. And that's one of the great advantages because there are two schools of thought about starting a business: jack everything and start it, or not start anything, just do the corporate life, or do the in between, which is sometimes a compromise because you may not gain traction in the market. You might get overtaken by others before you become successful. But for me, it was great because I had this safety net of a nice amount of money behind me to be able to go 18 months without pay to build up Touchday, and that's what we did.
You de-risk product market fit as well doing that, don't you? So you can spend longer sort of testing the market, exploring without the risk of the personal financial risk and experience on it. Interesting. Really exactly. Good. We need to move on to why you sold your business now, because we understand more about your person and your reasons. That's good.
Yeah, brilliant. But just to kind of explore that whole setup, you've talked about your motivations, wanting to really do and put in that effort for yourself, and I suppose for Joe as well as co-founder. But when you both set the business up, what were your ultimate goals?
Well, we first set it up in 2014, but then we had this year of hobbyist. So let's assume that I started it when I left Victoria Beckham, which was like end of 2017, so early 2018. The goal there was always to build a business to sell it. That was our intent. Now, at early days, we did toy with the idea of maybe we should just build up a nice lifestyle business and earn some money. But I don't know, as we got more into it, and especially when we went through the Virgin Startup Accelerator, we solidified around the idea of wanting to take investment and sell it. That was kind of the real purpose of doing it. But that's kind of functional. Like, what really drives you to do something is about heart, and it's about what I was saying just now. I had always, my dad started and sold his own business. I went through this period of like PwC in a growing business department, fascinated by growing business. I wanted to start my own business, but I didn't feel like I had any of the skills necessary to do that until when I did. And I had to scratch that itch. It was more than scratching itch. I had to commit to it. And so it was kind of like a bit of function, but a bit of like real heart too. And so we definitely wanted to get investment and sell it. That was definitely the goal, but it was also backed by this, at least for me anyway. I'm sure I know Joe feels similarly as well, because he wanted to build something himself. He's very independent as well. And that's what we wanted to do.
It's interesting. We often talk about, Romesh and I, people, purpose, or money. And I think in that answer there, you've really nicely wedded the little triangle of having an aspiration for sale, but also at the same time, it's about your own personal journey and what you're trying to achieve. And I think that's where the purpose word navigates nicely in between.
Yeah, and also I think we all find in our daily roles periods where it's not fulfilling, like the job is not fulfilling, or it's frustrating, or it's hard, or it's and those are the natural signs, and that's no different in startup life. But there's a certain point where you get to where it's all a bit too hard, or it all feels a bit unnatural. And I think many people are in that trap of, I think it's less so these days because we have more choice, but certainly I think a lot of people feel the need, the mortgage is there, the family's there, that, you know, I need to do the right thing. But I've always been one of those people who, if I'm not feeling right about something, I'll change it, and I back myself to say I'll change it, and things might be dodgy for a while, but I'll figure it out. And I think that's an important thread that goes through it all. That if you're not enjoying anything in your life, fine, because we don't all enjoy it all the time. But if it becomes a consistent thing, it becomes a chronic thing, then, you know, like you've got to do something about it. You've got to change it. And for us, that was starting a business.
Tell us about the journey to selling the business. Then the thought process. You talked about health and other factors as well. So yeah, we'd love to hear more about that, Andy.
Yeah. So my latest health scare, I talked about the first one that made us kind of jump and want to start Touch Day. Interestingly, the thing that made me want to sell Touch Day was that I had a stroke 2 years ago, and as you can see, I'm perfectly functional and normal. But I just run the London Marathon, crossed the London Marathon finish line, felt great, high-fiving everyone, you know, it's like life's good, and then I just felt awfully weird. Long story short, I had a stroke, and then 6 months later, my younger brother died. And those two events within the space of 6 months, there's nothing like something or two huge events like that to make you stop and take stock and think about what it is you're doing. And whilst I was enjoying Touch Day and we were building and we were growing really nicely, there felt like there was something else that I wanted to do in my life. It felt like this wasn't the only thing that I would do for the rest of my time. And, you know, frankly, we thought we'd built a nice business and we thought we created enough value for it to be the right time to sell in our market. And interestingly, Joe and I had a chat, and Joe was like, I don't want to sell because I think we've got more growth potential here. And I was like, but I do want to sell. You know, it's like one of those kind of weird moments where we weren't aligned. And we've been aligned in most of our journey, but we weren't. And we settled on, well, he said, I want this as a minimum then. If we're going to go and sell, I want this as a minimum. And I was like, oh, okay. I think it's a bit punchy, but sure, let's try that. So we through the help of an industry friend who now has his own M&A business, a guy called Simon Lehman, who runs AJL Consulting. We approached him and said, look, what do you think? And he said, I think you can achieve a nice value for what you've built, you know, and I think that there'll be demand for this. So it was the health thing that triggered it. It was then a discussion between Joe and I about do you, don't you, and reaching a compromise on, well, let's go for it at your value and let's see where we go. And then coupled with this industry friend who I had, who was very good in M&A and knew the market. And we said, well, let's do it. So let's try it. And so at the end of last year, sort of like late 2023, we put an investment memorandum together and approached a few people and had a couple of offers and some further interest, but they weren't quite right. And through this kind of process of kind of like, well, they're not quite right, but someone's put money on the table. Like, what should we do? We got this offer from the person that the group that did buy us, came directly to my inbox, which was weird, like a cold email. We want to buy your business, and usually I go delete, but this one had like something about it. I was like, no. So I passed it along to Simon and his team, and the rest is history. That's kind of how we did it. There's a lot of nuance in between there, which I can go into at various facets of selling a business.
Why did you decide those weren't the right offers? Because it implies there's more depth to the understanding of what you're trying to do when you're selling, I guess.
Yeah, look. I mean, the first thing is that there's a paper offer, and then there's a reality of what you'll get. Okay.
Yeah.
So someone might come along and I'll give you X million. And you go, wow, that's fantastic. Where do we sign? And then they go, but wait, in order to get that X million, we'll give you 50%, 40%, 30% of that now. And the rest of it, you have to wait for a couple of years because you're going to go on an earn out. And by the way, over those 2 years, we're going to set you profit targets and we're going to set you revenue targets. And we own your business in those 2 years. And so as a founder, I sat there and I thought, well, all right, on paper at the end of 2 years, we could have a really lucrative deal here. But I know that over the next 2 years, I'm being hamstrung because you're going to tell me I can't spend what I was used to spending to generate sales and leads, because you're setting me a profit target that I don't think is realistic in order for us to achieve the growth we need to achieve. So why on earth would I accept that offer just for it to be this vanity paper thing? And so we went through this kind of thing of, I remember saying to Simon, look, we're only doing this if we sell for cash, all up front, day one. And he was like, well, we could try. And so we had this couple of deals which were both on 2 year earnouts, and it was those elements. Plus, it's also when you get to talk to these potential buyers, because you have various courting things. You do a couple of Zoom calls and they ask you questions, and you're reading them as much as they're reading you.
Yeah.
And I did read a book. I can't remember what the book was called. It was a famous one about selling your business. And one of the things that came up there was you shouldn't be the one who's being interviewed. You should interview them too. So if a buyer's coming and asking you a bunch of questions, answer them, but then say to them, like, why do you want to buy my business? What's brought you here? Why is it special? How are you going to support us to achieve the earnout? And I've got to say that I wasn't confident in the buyers who were offering earnouts that made me feel that my already slightly pessimistic view about ability to hit earnouts was going to be any better. And so we put those on the table, and so we tried to negotiate, right? We tried to say, well, look, that's great, but can we have 50% upfront, 60% upfront, and can we take away the profit thing? And you try to do all those negotiations, but and sometimes people give a little, but there's a certain point where they go, right, that's it, we're not going to give you any more. You've reached that limit. And we reached that limit, and the deal wasn't good enough, so we didn't pursue those. But the one we did go for pretty much ticked all our boxes. It wasn't entirely cash up front, a large part was, but crucial for me was I didn't have, Joe and I did not have a financial earnout. We had a time-based earnout. So we just had to work for 6 months, be good citizens, hand the business over. And actually through those 6 months, I've developed a really good relationship with them. And so much so that I am still doing a little bit of advisory work for them in the short term. So it's difficult when you sell, but you've got to weigh up these things and particularly the earnout. Like I think if you talk to a lot of people, they say, the earnout's all well and good, but you rarely hit your earnout. And cash today is certain and it's more valuable than, a promise in the future.
Andy, we know each other really well, and I know the process that you just described, quite lightheartedly, at a high level, and you've achieved an excellent outcome. But I know that there were lots of grey areas, lots of uncertainty. We had some long chats ourselves. I know that you spoke to a lot of other people. Can you touch upon some of those pain points or areas of indecision that you encountered?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, Ron, because you're right. I went straight to functional part of selling and negotiation and tactics and value. But the reality was, as you well know, because for those, Rom explained it before, we are good friends and etc. But so much so that I picked the phone up to Rom one time. I was driving back from, I can't remember where, and I was in the car and I had a 2-hour conversation with him on the way home. And I said to him, look, mate, I'm really angsty about selling this business. I don't know if it's the right thing to do. And as ever, for those of you who don't know Rom, he breaks things down into this immensely understandable simplicity, which is really hard to do when things are very complicated. And just asked me a few questions, despite the fact that it took 2 hours, but probably as you can tell, I talk. So it was probably 1 hour and 50 of me rabbiting on, and Ron was like, all right, Andy, just stop. But some of those things were around, like, I built this business and I started the business and it was my baby, and it just seems, I don't know, there are so many times when I think about it, I'm like, Andy, it's a business, it's a name, it's a number on company's house, like, it's not your baby. But somehow it is, like, you built it, you created it, you've got a team there who you built, you've got customers who you have wonderful relationships with, who you feel a sense of, oh, I'm going to sell now, and what's going to be like for them with the new owners. So you have all of these feelings, and that what this sort of all happened, if you remember, Ron, this happened before I wanted to sign the LOI. So this was, negotiations had all been done. It was like, now I've got to sign the LOI, and LOI, letter of intent. So basically the heads of terms for the deal you're going to do. Then you go through a whole due diligence, which formalizes those heads of terms into a real legal structure. So that LOI isn't actually binding. It's not legally binding. It's the deal that comes after that's legally binding. But the LOI is a good faith intent. So you're basically saying, I will sell you my business if we go through this process and everything works out. So that signing of the LOI is almost like the moment where you're like, I'm going to do this. And I struggled with it. I really did. I had tears. Honestly, I was a wreck for a long time about this. But at the same time, and Rom had said this, like, why are you selling? And he was asking me about, do you need the money? Is it about the health stuff? Is it about, put all these like really pertinent questions to me. And in the end, I realized it was about, going back to the what I've said before on this course, about the heart. And it was about knowing that this was the right moment because of the stroke of my brother, of feeling that there was something that I needed to change in my career trajectory next. And you might ask me what I'm going to go and do next. I have no freaking idea, but I know there was like a friction that needed to change. And so those are the parts of selling the business that were really hard. And for anyone who's like thinking about selling or is like building up to sell, I think one of the really important things I would try and encourage you to think about is, what would make you sell? What is it your end goal? Like, what are you striving for? And get clear in your mind about what, if someone came along and offered you a sale in this year or in 3 years' time, what is it why is it you're doing that? And if you don't really have any purpose to that why, then particularly in our case, in a growing SaaS business, you should not sell, because theoretically every day you hold on to the business, you're growing, so you're becoming more valuable. So having that real clear purpose about why you want to sell is critical, and also knowing the value at which you would sell. We had this conversation about Joe and I having just disagreement about value, but in the end we came to a compromise, which was the deal that we accepted. But you've got to if you've got a co-founder, you've also got to be very much aligned with why they want to sell and what their minimum terms are, because they have lives and they're different to your life, and they haven't had a stroke and you have, and you've got to navigate that process too. So I don't know, did that answer your question, Ron?
It did, very much. Thank you, Andy.
Very much.
Andy, that's really powerful stuff, actually. There's so much that we could continue to talk about. But Mike, did you want to bring in some audience questions here?
I think I'm going to ask for audience questions, actually. I think we haven't had any through yet. We've had some people praising you, Andy, so that's really nice. But yeah, this is a good opportunity if the audience have any questions and want to push any forward to Andy. In the meantime, I'd like to ask a question, I think. You've talked a lot about your experience of making a decision, the analytical side of it and the emotional side of it. And you talked a lot to us when we had the introductory call last week. How do you think you balance that equation when you're an entrepreneur and when you're a person looking to sell your business? And you touched on how you'd make those recommendations to another entrepreneur who's looking at that point of selling now and the decision making they've got to go through. How do you kind of balance that number versus emotional debate that you're going to have with yourself?
You mean about the point of selling?
Yes. Yeah, the point of selling.
I don't know. To be honest, I think the power of having a network around you is immensely helpful to me. Like someone like Romesh was a great person who knows me quite well and knows the business quite well. So that was a very logical kind of person. I don't hate to call you my network, Ron, but you know what I mean. But then there's your family. There's my wife, who was very pivotal. And she was like, "You need to sell this thing. Please sell it." And even my son and daughter who the last 10 years have seen me run Touch Day, I just like, well, like, why are you selling it? Like, and you talk to people like Simon and on the M&A side, it's for me anyway, I'm somebody who seeks, I consult about everything. Like if I've ever got a doubt about something, I'll go and pick up the phone or drop an email to whoever I think can help. And I'll be the same way to them at some point in the future too. And that's the way things work. But I find having many different points of view really, really helpful. Even at the end of the day, it can be quite overwhelming to synthesize all those points of view into, well, what am I going to do? I find it really helpful because I'm looking for people to say something which makes me go, oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Or, gosh, I've got that a bit wrong. And you can't do that in isolation. You can't take decisions like that by yourself without, I mean, some people can. Some people are very strong-willed and determined and know what they want to do, and they do it. But I think a lot of us, even if we don't admit it, we don't know all the answers, and we need to consult. And to answer your question, that kind of that balance there is only achieved by asking other people in my network who had different perspectives.
It's come out from a lot of our discussions with people on different entrepreneurial journeys, is that ability to have a network of trusted advisors to really help you when you need to make some of those difficult, unusual, unknown decisions is so important. But what's next for Andy now? Now you're on this journey, what are you going to do next?
I don't know. I honestly, Mike, I don't know. Ron said to me, think hard about that question so that when you get asked it, you can give a good. I don't know. I'm useless. But listen, when I've spoken to people about selling, and everyone has said what next, but when I get into discussion, most people eventually say, "Don't rush. Take your time. Use this as a moment to relax and enjoy what you've achieved." And that's where I am right now. I'm not in a hurry to find the next thing. I am in a hurry to kind of like take the cork out of the body and let it just kind of breathe a bit, and enjoy some of the, frankly, enjoy some of the money that we made from this, and to do a bit of traveling and just that said, Mike, I am who I am, and I can't resist being interested in what other people are up to. So I am going to be on the advisory board of another startup in our industry. I have just been accepted to be a Virgin Startup Mentor, and that was my way of giving back to the Virgin Startup community where the original lead investor came from. So that's a voluntary basis, but giving some of my time to others who, like I don't have all the answers, and I'm niche in this particular SaaS young business in travel, but I have got business experience, and I have got, I think, a perspective on life too, and I think that's at the heart of a lot of what people do in entrepreneurial businesses is thinking about how to carve out a different kind of life for themselves or a better life for themselves, and often I think I can give a bit of perspective to that too. So that may be where I end up going in the realm of kind of helping other younger businesses. I don't know. There's something at the guy that's taken over from me at Touch Day, a guy called Sivan Kadosh. He's a wonderful guy. He's very, very thoughtful. And he said to me, Andy, he said, "You know what? I don't think that's what you're going to do." He said, "I think you're going to find something else. And I don't know what it is, but to me, it feels like you want to genuinely help someone as opposed to helping a startup. And I think there's a difference there." We'll see where that goes.
I think that's my insight talking to you, Andy. I think you've got a lot to offer based on this conversation and experience, that mix of money, analytical approach, and also decision making. And I think you'll offer value, but I think you seem like someone who'd want to get in and get dirty and get busy with the right opportunity, I think. And
that's the danger.
It's interesting to see your journey, right?
Yeah, that's the danger. I don't want to, that's a red line for me, a bit kind of getting in and getting dirty. And I think that's the bit that I'm going to struggle with. I can't put myself back. Otherwise, I'd have kept Touch Day, right? That wasn't the point.
Yeah.
I would have kept growing it. So you're right. That is kind of what I would end up doing if I don't check myself.
Really interesting. We've got one question actually, which is a good one, and I think I like it. How did you keep your team aware of the process when you were selling, so they know what's happening? How do you provide reassurance to them?
I wish I could remember that book that I read. I'm going to look it up and maybe share it with you afterwards. But one of the things in that book, as well as talking about many aspects of selling, was when to tell your team. And it was categorically, do not tell them until it's done. And that was counterintuitive to everything I feel about team and people. I'm transparent. I over communicate. I want to tell them stuff. I want them to kind of come along with me. And I had to keep my mouth shut. And the reason you don't tell people till the end is because you end up disrupting the team and they start to think about what's coming next. And that can cause not only some disruption in the business, but also some disruption to the sale process. And when I did tell, I actually did tell two of the team, because I was in the US at an event on the day that we signed the deal. Now, we'd signed it, but the buyer hadn't signed it by then, but I knew it was pretty much done. So I said to two of the team, Tyann and Lauren, actually, no, Tyann knew because she was an investor, stupid me, she knew. But Lauren, I sat down with Lauren and I said, I can't have seen her in person in the US, go back to the UK, and then the next day pick up the phone and say, Lauren, we sold the business. So I had to, so I told her. And, Lauren's one of these genuine people in life, and she had a really, and it gets me to a very emotional reaction to it. Yeah. And I realized at that point that it was the right thing to tell them at the end, because I wouldn't have been able to deal with all of that had I told them during the process. And I don't think many of the team would have been comfortable, just it's all good, just get on and do your work. That's not the way it would have been. So yeah, leave it to the end is both the theoretical advice from people that know, but also I can tell you from someone who wanted to tell everyone straight away, it's also the right thing to wait till the end.
Really good. We're coming to the end now, so I'm going to pass over to Romesh in one second. But it's really interesting, and the conversation you've given me here, the reflection for me is business about exiting? Well, that was your original plan, but actually it's the journey of the business that I think you articulate more importantly for you as a person. And I think what we're kind of saying here is that if a business is looking at exiting, there is a big financial process decision, and you do need to read those books and take counsel. But it's also a life-changing decision. And I think that is the interesting part of this. And I think based on what you're telling me, Andy, this feels like a journey that requires both of those. Really carefully think about what you're trying to achieve personally, what your personal journey is, and also what the numbers, process, and mechanism are that make this work. The fact that you've got such a good relationship with your the purchasers now is kind of testament to picking the right company and who you are and what you've tried to achieve here, which I think is great. Romesh, over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Andy, really enjoyed listening to you, actually. I mean, I know a lot of your story as a friend, but I think you touched on some really fascinating areas. I think personally, I'm so glad that you're taking the time now to enjoy what you've achieved, and that's really important. You work hard. You've and the team work really hard. You've got to this point, savor it, enjoy it, and make the most of it. And I'm really so happy for you doing that. And of course, also happy to know that you're taking the time to think deeply about the next step, because it's a big decision, and I'm sure you're going to make the right moves for you. So thank you so much again for coming on. And I'm sure everyone listening will have really enjoyed that. Thanks to everyone for coming along and listening to our discussion today. When Mike and I set up Strive and Thrive, we wanted to open up interesting discussions in the business space for ourselves to learn and to share with those that are interested. Strive and Thrive is currently a monthly series, and we have a great pipeline of interesting people to share their insights with you. The next session will be on the 12th of December. We'll share more details on social media over the next few weeks. So again, finally, Andy, thank you so much again. Big thanks to Mike and the rest of the Strive and Thrive team. See you next time.
Thanks
Andy. Lovely to meet you. Good discussion.
Yeah.